قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ما شاء الله كان ما لم يشاء لم يكون إلهي أنت مقصودي رضاك مطلوبي أعطني محبتك ومعرفتك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Thank you very much, Brother Ibrahim, for inviting me to share the book that has been published this year on one of our prolific Islamic scholars in Singapore, Almarhum Ustaz Ahmad bin Muhammad Samit, who is known, right, by people of the older generations and also those between the age of 30, late 30s and early 40s when we were growing up, attending part-time madrasah. And we read his book, Mari Sembayang, both for the male and the female, right? And also knowing some of his book, right, that is published, not published, which he owns himself as Pustaka National. Right? And Pustaka National was at Pasar Geylang, right? If some of you remember, yeah, Pasar Geylang, and then it was at Wisma Indah, was at Wisma Indah until the time of Almarhum passes on. After Almarhum passes on, somehow or another, Pustaka National was was not that prominent anymore. Was not that prominent anymore. And his books seems to lose the kind of audience that it had before, due to the reasons also that all of the books that Almarhum wrote, edit, translate, published, and all that are basically in the Malay language. In the Malay language. As our society progresses, or as our society move on with the wave of modernization, somehow or other, the English language becomes a more comfortable language, right, in the learning and teaching of Islamic classes, Islamic discourse. So therefore, the books by Al-Marhum took a back seat, right, within our contemporary discourse. Although there are still classes conducted by our asatizahs in Singapore that uses the book of Almarhum Ustaz Syed Ahmad Samit, for example, the book of Kuliah Subuh, the book of Kuliah Subuh by Al-Fadil, which is a syarah of the 40 hadiths of Imam An-Nawawi. 40 hadiths of Imam An-Nawawi, which was initially published as 3 volumes. Then Marhum republished it, right, to all the 3 being put together and calling it Kuliah Subuh, because as he mentioned in his prakata or in his forward, that he wanted, right, the Muslim community, right, to read or to engage in knowledge immediately after Subuh, so that, right, because the time after Subuh to Shuruk is the one of the most barakah times, and it is a time where angels comes and visit. So instead of us, right, playing our music of snoring, it would be better, okay, for us to go and read the book. So the playing of music of snoring came from me, not from him. That is my addition. That is my addition to that. Okay. Now, in the book that is been written, the genesis of the book could be traced from my early days of volunteering at Muslims Convert Association of Singapore. We have Brother Shukur down here also. Brother Shukur was also part of those volunteers when we were still young during that period of time. Still young. In our 20s, in our early 20s. In our early 20s, when we started to volunteer at the Muslims Convert Association of Singapore, where that was a place where it opens up my eyes in terms of how Islam could be disseminated to various cultures. And when you are disseminating Islam, you need to be able to take note of the cultural aspect, the intelligence aspect of the people who are coming over, all right, to look for answers, walk through the doors of the galaxy, Darul Arkam's building, right? We must be able to give them or to be able to deliver that message of Islam with hikmah. That is where I said this in my introduction, in my acknowledgement of the book. All right. For those of you who have the book, all right, you can turn to page number 22 of the book. Page 22 of the book, where I said down there, the genesis of this work as its links to my involvement as a volunteer at the Muslim Converts Association of Singapore, better known as Darul Arkam Singapore, since 1998. As a volunteer there, I was exposed to the importance of understanding cultural context when presenting the message of Islam. I met for the first time the concept of cross-cultural da'wah, which was discussed by Brother Ridwan Wu, who was then the president of the association during my early years as a volunteer at the association. Those concepts triggered my curiosity to conduct my own readings on the coming of Islam into the Malay world. These readings and my interaction as a volunteer and a teacher at the association illustrate to me the beauty of Islam from different perspectives. Islam is dynamic and can be presented in multiple ways which take into account the cultural, social, and intellectual aspects of the listener. What fascinates me most then was the cultural intelligence of the Alawiyins in their da'wah methods. My motivation to conduct research on their da'wah methods spurred me, right, to meet then the Dean of ISTEC, Professor Ibrahim Zain, right, and after a discussion with Professor Ibrahim Zain, that is where I managed to get myself an admission to ISTEC to conduct this research on the da'wah works of the Alawiyin. But at the very beginning of of my research, I was overwhelmed by the numerous contributions and the roles of the Alawiyins in disseminating Islamic teaching and Islam. And majority of us will know, all right, the kind of contributions that the Sayyids has made, all right, to Islam, all right, within the Southeast Asian region. And if you were to read, all right, all the writings, they came there merchants, all right, trades, and many other. They give lands, they build madrasas, and a lot of things that they have carried out. Now, in my opinion, two contemporary scholars stand out among the rest in their influence and impact on the Malay community in Singapore. At the beginning of my research, I was looking at four people, all right, four figures. Number one was Habib Noor al-Habashi, rahimahullah, Maulana Abdul Alim al-Siddiqui, Shah Omar al-Khatib, and also Said Ahmad Samit. Four of them. But because it was a master's thesis, so my supervisor said, you go and choose one. Four is just too much for you. Four was just too many for you. Okay. So Maulana Abdul Alim al-Siddiqui is also a Sayyid. He's also among the Ahlul Bayt. Among the Ahlul Bayt. So then I narrowed it down to Shah Omar al-Khatib and also Said Ahmad Samit. And then finally I chose Al-Marhum Said Ahmad Samit due to the literary output that I could easily avail myself to in order for me to be able to focus on his thoughts, how he was able to diagnose the malice of the community during his period of time. Now, the interesting thing about Ustaz Ahmad Samit is that I pause for a while, Azan. Allah. Allah. Right. So as I was saying that the narrowing about not narrowing to two scholars, Al-Marhum Shaykh Omar Al-Khatib and also Al-Marhum Said Ahmad Sumit. And finally, I picked up Said Ahmad Sumit due to the amount of literary output that he has produced, and also the availability of the materials, and being a student at that period of time, time is a practical issue. Time is a practical issue in order for us to produce some of this work. All right. So that's the genesis of the work. Now, if you will look at the book, all right, I start off the book, all right, from page number 25 of the book, all right, with an introduction in the tracing the Islamization of the Malay world, but not from the perspective of the socio-political, but more from the perspective of Islam being the motivating factor in driving scholars of that time to produce literary works. Right? Although I need to move the introduction, right, from that trait, the role of the social factors of the Hadramis that came over to this part of the world. Right? Now, I do not deny the possibility of other theories of Islamization, right? Other theories of Islamization that in this Malay world, which is the theory that, all right, it could also be the Indian merchants, or it also could come from the route that comes from China. So this chapter is not about putting in the various debates to point out who is the first person who reached the Malay world, but it is a general overview of the different theories that is out there, but then it slowly goes on to focus, right, on the writings that has been produced, the literary output of our Nusantara scholars that is there, all right, that were there in order to make to disseminate the Islamic teaching within their environmental context. Okay, so that's the first chapter. And the second chapter, I straight away goes into Al-Marhum Ustaz Said Ahmad Sumit personal and environmental context. In there, all right, I trace a bit of the role that Al-Marhum Shaykh Omar Al-Khatib played in developing the thought of Said Ahmad Sumit, because that said Al-Marhum Shaykh Omar Al-Khatib is a direct teacher of Al-Marhum Said Ahmad Sumit. So, and Said Ahmad Sumit himself took over the classes of Al-Marhum Shaykh Omar Al-Khatib at Masjid Abdul Razak, right, after the demise of Shaykh Omar Al-Khatib, right, his class on Ihya Ulumuddin and Ihya Ulumuddin. Now, within this background, right, one thing that makes Al-Marhum Said Ahmad Sumit very important in understanding the lives, the social context of the Malay community, is because he lived within three very important eras, which is the earlier 20th century to the end of the World War I. So you can find this breakdown on page 55, right? So the first period, right, the early 20th century to the end of World War I, 1933 to 1945, and then post-World War to the end of World War II, post-World War II to the separation of Malaya, 1945 to 1965, and then the post-independence, which is from 1965 to the demise of Al-Marhum. So these three unique phases of how the Malay Muslim community in Singapore were faced with various challenges. And he records these challenges inside his introduction. So if you were to go to his books, you need to read his prakata, his preface. Although all of them are in Malay, you need to read the preface. If you don't read the preface, you will miss out why he has written this book. What is the role and function of this book vis-a-vis the corpus of books that he is doing, all right, in tackling the problem of the Malay community. So his idea is to uplift the Malay community through knowledge, right? Through knowledge, through the reading. Although he understood also that at that point of time, not many people also love to read. Not many people also love to read. Right? So therefore, you have, right, as he mentioned that the purpose of why the Kuliah Subuh initially was done in 3 volumes, right, so that people can be more acquainted to writing, why the Ihya Ulumuddin needs to be reduced in terms of its size, right, so that, right, people are able to digest these different ideas that is coming from classical texts. So the way on how he wants to educate people is to go back to the classical text, make the classical text readable to the people, not only classical text that is coming from scholars of like Al-Ghazali, Abdullah Al-Haddad, right, of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, right, all these people, but also the classical texts that are unique to the Malay Nusantara, which are written in Old Jawi. So therefore, all right, he also revamped that Old Jawi into modern Jawi, and then later on, all right, the book on Nasihat Agama, okay, the first few prints were written in Jawi, but then due to the environment again, the context of the Malay community, that is being changed to Rumi. Right, the whole book is being changed to Rumi, so that more of the people are able to access. So you see a scholar here, all right, who is totally immersed in the community, knowing exactly what the community requires during that period of time and addressing them, all right, through his books, right, through his writing and his publication. Now, of course, Ustaz Ahmad also, all right, in chapter number 3, okay, I traced his writings and also his teachings. His writings, and he teach using his books. He teach using his books, not only in Singapore, but also in KL, in Kuala Lumpur. So he has classes over in Kuala Lumpur, all right, in teaching the works of Imam Abdullah Al-Haddad. Right? So that's the rough overview of the book, that a very thin book that is meant for easy reading for everybody, in us appreciating our local ulama, and also reading some of his work, because there are still gems inside there, although it is in the Malay language. Right, a way forward is to get scholars or translators to translate them into English, right? Make it a bit more contemporary in terms of the issues that he was addressing with the issues that we are currently facing, all right? And his books are still going to be relevant. So I pause here for a while for discussion, feedback, those of you who have read, any suggestions that you have.
Assalamualaikum Ustaz, everyone. Ustaz Mubarak.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Just wanted to ask just a question on page 57 of your book.
Okay.
You said that several key challenges within the Muslim community in the early 1920s. The first was Singapore's role as a center for Islamic reformism of thought began to wane away. That's the first. Then the second one, the second change was the increasing tension among the many ethnic groups within the Muslim population, As the number of elite Malays coming from vernacular English schools began to increase, they began to challenge the leadership of the Arabs who were considered to be inheritors of wisdom of Islam and exemplars of religious piety in early years. Well, what exactly was the issue then? I mean, was it like the Ibn Rushd and Imam Al-Ghazali kind of concept where, these guys, they went to the schools, the vernacular schools, they came in with their rational thinking, and then you have the Arab scholars who were there to bring the way Islam was taught, and then there's a conflict between the way Islam was approached. Is it along?
I will not say that it is the Ibn Rushd and the Al-Ghazali way of conflict. That is too high level.
Okay.
Okay, that is a too high level. The conflict is more of the conflict in terms of you have that kind of idea where interpretation of Islam is only through the eyes of the Arabs.
Right.
Whereas at that point of time, you are already having scholars who are not Arabs who have came back to study. Right. Local scholars. Right. Although at that point of time, some of the Arabs were already indigenous people, the second generations and all that. But again, the kind of hormah, the kind of respect and honor that is being given to the Sayyids at that point of time, somehow or another, you put the whatever that comes from them, that's the idea, that's the answer. No one else can say anything. So that was the kind of challenge that was happening. All right, that alternative views that is coming from people who are also qualified, all right, to give. And of course, you have those kind of vernacular school where more rational thinking and kind of, but it's not that kind of Ibn Rushd and Al-Ghazali. Ibn Rushd and Al-Ghazali rationality and all that is still embedded within, all right, the foundation of Quran and Sunnah. When we talk about vernacular school, where it is run by the colonial masters, all right, it's a totally different ball game.
Yep. Understood. Right. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
On cultural intelligence.
Yeah.
On page 25, one way to understand cultural intelligence, the way you put it, is that they demonstrated the flexibility or the ability to blend with cultural practices. And this is with regards to Buddhists and Hindus practices, I suppose. Can we today point out certain practices that are practiced today that have been blended with Hindu or Buddhist practices?
Now, our walimatul urus, right? The way on how we carry out our walimatul urus, right? Our weddings. That is a clear example. Where you are the malam berinai, okay, and then a few other practices that was made it blended within the Islamic culture. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And there's a question
Thank
on
you.
Now that the one of is published, are you going to do the other thing? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Inshallah, may Allah give me the strength to be able to do a few more people. Inshallah. Yeah.
Actually, I have a related question to Amira's, and that's about, because as extraordinary as Syed Ahmad is, and the achievements that he's done, he was not a singular person, because he operated in a milieu. There was his contemporaries like Syed Abdullah Jufri, and there's even like Ustad Ahmad Sun Haji, the scholar in Singapore was the first to complete a complete tafsir of the Quran. So there's actually quite a lot of work to be done in order to record the achievements, not only as individuals, but how they collectively came together in order to lift up the discourse and the knowledge of Islam in Singapore.
Yeah, definitely. So a study on Ustad Ahmad Sun Haji is currently
Assalamualaikum. Can you hear me?
As currently completed Ustaz Ahmad Sun Haji by Fadil Ustaz Ushairi from Masjid Kampung Siglap. So he is in the process of publishing that. But then as a whole, I think Pergas is working on it through the Obor Ummah project, right? Publishing the different the beam of the Ummah, right? I think they are now up to the number 3 or number 4 Obor Ummah in terms of that. Yeah, definitely it is important. Definitely.
Brother Hussein, you have a question? I have a question here. Someone sent me about asking about, it's a genealogy question, whether Syed Ahmad bin Samit and Habib Zain bin Samit of Indonesia are related.
Well, they are related with the surname, the Samit surname, definitely. So if you were to trace, they would have met somewhere. But of course, Syed Ahmad Samit is the elder brother of our former Mufti, Syed Isa Samit. Right? So that's a direct relationship. Right? Our second Mufti of Singapore, Fadil Sheikh Syed Ahmad Syed Isa Samit. Right? So the one in Indonesia, because they are definitely somewhere they will meet within the genealogy. Right? So if you look at the book, I think our publisher, Mazduki, traced the genealogy of Almarhum Syed Ahmad Samit. Syed Ahmad Samit on page number 7 and number 8. So if you were to look at Habib Zain and Abidin from Indonesia, somewhere around there they will meet. Exactly where, I do not know, because I don't go into the study of genealogy.
There's another question by Hazika, Sister Hazika. She's asking, I think, a follow-up question of Razif about cultural intelligence. Did our literary scholars or Islamic scholars interact with or engage with other cultural figures of their time, such as P. Ramlee?
I don't know whether he met P. Ramlee or not. I do not know whether Almarhum met P. Ramlee during that period of time or not. Okay. But in my book, I did mention a bit about the movies of P. Ramlee, and it's the way on how P. Ramlee uses movies to disseminate some of the Islamic teachings. Right? I traced the Pendeka Bujang Lapuk series right inside my book and mention it a bit about how are the series of the Bujang Lapuk series, right, in line with some of the dakwah methodology. Actually meeting, I do not know. I didn't go into that aspect. Allahu a'lam bishawab. I'm not too sure who I need to ask on that.
Sorry, yeah, I don't mean like meet in person, but like engage with the work or like in some way, yeah, engage with the work, not necessarily in person.
Work, yes. Ustaz Syed Ahmad Samit has books on Malay literature. He started off writing his books on Malay literature. Literary works, not Islamic works. So he had 4 books that were initially published, which he wrote, basically the Malay sastra kind of work. So yes, he did engage on it.
Thank you.
There is one question that is sent privately to me. So if you have a question, please send to the to everyone, so that Brother Ibrahim can also help me monitor. Okay. There are 2 questions here. Please excuse my ignorance on the subject. Is there any familiar? Okay, that one answered. You mentioned Al-Ghazali Ihya, but I didn't quite catch what you said about Syed Ahmad and Ihya. Did he translate it? No, Syed Ahmad Samit did not translate Ihya Ulumuddin. But he taught Ihya Ulumuddin at Masjid Abdul Razak, right, taking over from his teacher Almarhum Syekh Omar Al-Khatib. But he did publish under Pustaka Nasional, all right, an Indonesian translation of Ihya Ulumuddin into that 4 thick books. in the 4 textbook. All right. So he gave a new face to it, all right, in terms of editing it and all that. So Pustaka Nasional did publish the full Ihya Ulumuddin translated into Indonesian. Okay. Number 3, I also miss what you said about Imam Nawawi's 40 hadiths, work on that. So I said Ustaz Ahmad Samit's work on Imam Nawawi's 40 hadiths is known as Kuliah Subuh. So the Kuliah Subuh is basically the syarah of the 40 hadiths of Imam An-Nawawi. Have any of Sayyid Ahmad Samit's work been translated into Arabic or English? Nope, none. I was working on translating his work into English, but that work I put it on hold of time. I put that work a bit on hold. I was translating his Wasiyat Luqmanul Hakim. The Wasiyat of Luqmanul Hakim. At that time, why I was translating it is because one of my late Professor Said Ajmal, which I dedicate this book to him, all right, was in the process of translating Masnawi. And he completed translating the Masnawi in 10 months. So I was inspired by him and I tried. So Prof, can I do translation and you check? Okay, you go and do. I do. Susah, difficult. So I put that on hold for a while. Inshallah, I will start working on. I've discussed with Ustaz Mazduki on looking at the Kuliah Subuh and translating it with adding contemporary issues as part of the whole thing. Yeah, inshallah. It's number 4. Okay, that's all. Then another one. Privately to me, from your knowledge of Sayyid Ahmad's work, do you believe his book is something all Muslims can benefit from today, including Arabs or English-speaking Muslim? Or do you feel his works are more suited to a Malay audience? Well, he addresses the issues within the Malay community. Of course, some of the issues, all right, are issues which are common throughout the whole Malay world, like the issue of bid'ah, the issue of wasatiyah. So some of these issues are general, right? Some are specific to the social context of the Malay community. That's all from the private chat that they have sent to me.
Start question.
Yes.
Do we know the methodology he adopted in teaching is Ihya? Was it like a sequential, or I don't know? Is there some way he taught Ihya that we are not aware of?
Well, I did attend some of his classes of Ihya at that time when he was teaching. I was either in JC or I was in the university. I was in JC and then I was in the university. All right. Basically, it's reading directly from the Arabic. Someone will read, all right, the Arabic text, and then he will translate it, and then he explains it in sequential. Yeah.
And he used to, as you say, he used to read line by line, but his explanations can be the whole night. So very long explanation for just 1 or 2 lines of the Ihya.
So it's very slow lah.
It's very slow, yeah.
Very slow. When I interviewed our Mufti at the time, Sayyid Isa Samit, he told me at the time that after his brother passed on, he was the one who took over the classes. But I don't think now it is. Yeah, slower than our class, definitely.
There's another question from Fatima. There's a follow-up. Again, she's asking you, mentioned the concepts of bid'ah and wasatiyah. What were Said Ahmad's positions on these 2 points?
Position for bid'ah, if you look at the Kuliah Subuh, right, is taking the middle position. Right? Not to the extreme of total rejection, right? Not to the other extreme, right, of doing things which are baseless that you cannot get anything from the Sunnah. So he do, all right, in in an overall picture, right, he encourages Yasin, Tahajjud, Maulid and all that. That is his position. Now, one thing that I would like to emphasize on Marhum is that if you have the book, you turn to page 85. Right. Page 85 is Al-Marhum Magnum's opus. Okay. Now, I would say that in terms of the Sharah of Sahih al-Bukhari, although it is not completed, it's not completed, the Sharah of Imam Bukhari that is been done by Al-Marhum Sayyid Ahmad Samit, he only did 1/4 of the books of Sahih al-Bukhari. That 1/4 of the book of Sahih al-Bukhari, he used the print which has 4 books of Sahih al-Bukhari, Jami' of Sahih al-Bukhari. Right, that one itself becomes 6 books in his Sharah. Right, it becomes 6 books. And there he mentioned that in the introduction, right, of his magnum opus, that he had to read Fathul Bari, which is the Sharah of Sahih al-Bukhari, the whole thing, before he started writing. We can see the devotion that he has, the dedication that he had in this. Now, looking at the kind of writings, I would say that as a muhaddith, he can be considered as a muhaddith and produce a contemporary commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari for the Malay world. For the Malay world, although it is an incomplete work. So it is a book that I think for those people who are reading, right, who can read Malay, is a book that we should have. Right. Now, some of the characteristics of what he has put in within his magnum opus, right, which is found from page 88 onwards of the book, right, is that it did not translate the full chain of narration, because the whole objective was not to go into the values of the sanad or the rijalul hadith, but in discussing the hadith itself and its relevance to contemporary time. It doesn't mean that he is not interested in chain, because for him Sahih al-Bukhari is already an ijma from people, right? From our scholars, that it is already sahih. So you don't need to discuss anymore about the sanad. What is important here is the content, right? The matan of it, and the and the application of the matan to our daily life. Okay. Now, he followed the categorization of Imam Bukhari, right? Although he put in new subtopics to break up. Because if you look at the original Sahih al-Bukhari manuscript, right, there will be no breaking up. It's all continuous writing. So Sayyid Ahmad Samit will break it up. The same thing for Kuliah Subuh. He will break it up, right, into the various subtopics that he wants to discuss within the whole discussion related to the hadith. Okay? Now, when there are views that are differing from the mazahibs, right, he will discuss the varying views, but then he will give preference to the Shafi'i view to indicate the Malay Nusantara punya our how do I say it? I lost the word.
Mother.
Our mazhab is Shafi'i. Our mazhab is Shafi'i. So therefore, to show that the Malay world, we stick to this, although we acknowledge all the others. Okay? These are some of the characteristics of the magnum opus of Syed Ahmad Sadiq. It's a question for you, Brother Ibrahim.
Yeah, I saw that. The books by Said Ahmad Smith available for retail? Yes, they are still available. The publisher Pustaka Nasional is still active, and you can still order books from them, and they still supply books to bookshops such as, especially the Malay language bookshops such as Haji Hashim, such as Muslim Media and Wisma Indah. Haji Hashim is at Richard. Still, they still reprint his books and they're still available. There are some of his books that have been translated into English. For example, Maris Bayang, or is now translated as Let's Pray, is co-published with Darul Arqam. That is available at Wardah. And also he has one book about the Muqaddam, Let's Recite. That's also available in English. So there was an initiative to start translating some of the books from Malay to English. So there's some recognition that it was important to transit it into Malay, into English. But I don't know whether that's continuing or not on now. But yes, his books are available.
The Let's Pray book is being used at Darul Arqam as a free publication for the Salah tutorials. Yeah.
Another question by Fatima. I often hear that the Malays are Ash'ari in creed, Shafi'i in fiqh, and Sufi. And she's asking if the Sufism in Nusantara follows the Ba'alawi creed, and what did Said Ahmad practice or encourage himself?
Yeah. Marhum Said Ahmad Samit, right, is a Ba'alawi. Marhum Said Ahmad Samit is a Ba'alawi. He follows the Ba'alawi turuq. He also wrote the Shara of Ratib al-Haddad. It's a very thick Shara. The translation of Shara Ratib al-Haddad. He did the translation of that Shara into the Malay language. Okay, so but that is for Al-Marhum Sayyid Ahmad Samit. Now, generally in the Malay world, they are not just Ba'alawis. There are many different turuqs, in the Malay world. There's diverse turuqs in the Malay world. Yes, we are Ash'ari in terms of our creed, Shafi'i in terms of our fiqh, in terms of our Sufi, the Sufi practice, the Tasawwuf, I would give it more of a Ghazalian taste. A Ghazalian taste due to the emphasis more on the practical aspect of Sufism instead of the philosophical dimension of Sufism.
Ustad Mubarak, from a reading of this book, it appears the approach that he takes is very, very moderate. It is, like you mentioned, concentrating on the devotional aspects, not so much on the philosophical debates, the theological discussions, taking the middle ground, summary of Ihya Ulumuddin to make it palatable to a group of students who, you have to cater to the intellect level and stuff. He summarizes the Sahih al-Bukhari to make it easy to understand. This approach is also presently being adopted now in Singapore contemporary teachings, right? It's any different that we are doing now, or is it pretty much the same? Because he also talks about how it was important, that the Malay Muslims were very preoccupied with the worldly pursuits, that you needed a teacher to bring them back to what is really most important. And it's essentially what we are doing now, right?
Well, essentially it's still the same.
Right.
Essentially it's still the same. Okay. But I would say that you will still have that group of people, okay, who does not require the kind of theological and philosophical kind of discussion, in order to bring certainty to them. Very simple people, right, who are devotional and all that. But due to our progress in education, the kind of exposure that we are getting, okay, although it is devotional, we also cannot be complacent in just copy paste what was done 20, 30 years ago and then put it now, all right, for the new generation to adopt. Cannot, because
Right.
that the people right now, all right, their minds works differently due to kind of exposure that they have, all right, within the school curriculum. That is something we need to be aware of. So probably the devotional part, yes, we still need to maintain, but we cannot neglect that there will be a group of people who requires more, and we need to fill up that kind of gaps.
Right.
Paul was filling up that gap, the devotional gap, because that was very clearly seen during his period of time. The laxity of morality that was happening within the Malay population. Now, yes, we would see that the religiosity of Muslim, on one hand, the religiosity is higher. On the other hand, the religiosity is also going down. Yeah, depending on which angle you are looking at. Which angle you are looking at. So we cannot just take one and leave the other.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks.
We
So
have...
riding.
Okay. Carry on. Brazil.
Sorry. So riding on what Elvin is asking is, would you say that his approach or his way of writing will not be appropriate for today's message, or?
No, it's still appropriate for today's masses. It's still appropriate for today's masses. All right, because majority of people are still looking for the kind of devotional things, but it becomes a bit more inappropriate when you missed out contemporary issues. It becomes inappropriate when the language barrier is there. All right, and then probably the number of people, all right, that requires a bit more of uh, uh, theology and philosophy inside this kind of writings might not appeal to his kinds of books. That's what I'm saying.
Ustaz Mubarak, just to follow up with that. So from what you just said, you sort of imply that in any present time, let's say the Muslim community in Singapore or even the Malay speaking community in Singapore, it can be segmented to different groups. Like you say, for some groups you can say religiosity is going up, some groups religiosity is going up. So in the time of Almarhum say Ahmad Smaid, did his works address specific segments, or do you think he did more of like he cast a wide net?
Well, at that point of time, all right, the the segment of the community that is in the moral laxity is more due to our post-independence, the kind of social economic status that the Malay were at, okay, from the early 20th century to World War II, and then from World War II to after post-World War II to the independence and the post-independence. So the Malay Muslim community were at the crossroads between modernity and religiosity. How do you, all right, negotiate this religiosity and modernity? So that was a big issue during that period of time. Okay, and knowing that a lot of the Malay communities were among the lower earning people, lower earning people. So therefore, the kinds of writings that was used to address them, right, were more of the devotional kind. But at this point of time, I guess it's different. So if you want to cast the net wider, at that point of time, his writing cast the net very wide. right? I assume that it has reached what readers during a period of time. But now the issues are the same. Yes, approach needs to differ, right? And of course, we have more and we have new contemporary issues. Now, the idea of segregating the Malay community into the different segments, so that is how modern research methodology does. But our basis is that the Prophet ﷺ told us that we speak to the people ala qadru uqulihim, at the level of their intellect, at the level of their intelligence. That is an important principle that the Prophet had taught us. Now, that principle is applicable throughout. So we need that kind of diversity, right, within our religious education, within our religious scholars, within our asatizas in guiding our community, some addressing those that, right, requires a devotional. Some address the one that requires the intellectual, the philosophical type, right? We also now also need to look at the area of special needs also, right? On how we're going to tackle, right, Islamic religious teaching to those people with special needs. So that ala ukulihim, that is an important principle that every community, every generation of scholars needs to deal with it.
Thank you, Ustaz.
Ustaz, maybe to steer it back to the subject of Said Ahmad. You have studied his life and work, and I'm just wondering what are your key takeaways about his life and about his work for yourself that you could extrapolate for the rest of us.
Okay. Now, my key takeaways are found on page 108 and 109 of the book. Okay. In that paragraph there, Sir Ahmad has also given his students some words of advice on acquiring knowledge and also on cultivating noble characters. The following are Sir Ahmad's words of wisdom for those who wanted to embark on the path of knowledge and spirituality. Number one, students are not to delay in carrying out good deeds. If you have the intention to perform any good deeds, do it immediately, as any procrastination will provide time for the devil to sway you into other useless acts. Number two, students are to continuously attend halaqah or gatherings where there is the remembrance of Allah. This halaqah can be the halaqah of learning or the halaqah of zikr. By doing this, it will help students to purify their soul from impurities, which will hinder students from a true understanding of knowledge. Number three, show care and concern towards your brothers in Islam. If your fellow brother is absent from class, find out the reason for his absence. If he needs assistance, provide him with the relevant help so that he is able to attend classes again. Number four, read the Quran daily, as the Quran is the word of Allah. By reading the Quran, you are communicating with Allah and this will assist you in the purification of your heart. Number five, master the Arabic language, as the Arabic language is the key to understanding Islamic knowledge. These are 5 main takeaways that I have written in the book. Now, another takeaway for asatizas now, right, that you need dedication. You need to dedicate your whole life if you want to truly serve the community. You want to truly serve the ummah. You need to make a lot of sacrifice if you really want. All right. If you are really sincere in your act, right, of wanting to ensure that the Muslim community, right, will be protected from any form of vices. That dedication is seen from the work of Syed Ahmad Sumit, from his life, that he dedicated his whole life, and it's not a joke, right? That dedication, the amount of hours, the reduced amount of hours that he sleep, just to ensure that books are published on time, editing are done, right? Be critical in your eyes in looking at the problems of the community. And if you need to write, you write and address those things. So it is not just about teaching. It is not just about having many followers. It is about how, right, you can dedicate yourself to the ummah. This is a message, right, for religious teachers. right, in Singapore if we are looking at Said Ahmad Samit, Almarhum Said Ahmad Samit, as right, a role model, right, to the younger generations of Asatiza. After his demise, up till now, do we have a replacement for him? We don't have a replacement for him. No one is able to carry out the one-man show job that he did. Although, yes, he had a team. He had a team of translator, but team pun bukan 20-30 orang. Team 2 orang aja. His team is only two people. And of course, he has some other people that helps him, right, to cover the printing and all that. But he is there for all throughout the whole process. Do we have people dedicated like him right now? No. I want to start translate one book of his already. I find Allah Akbar so difficult. Right? Imagine him translating, right? Writing is a whole dedication. And that dedication comes from spiritual strength, the purification of the heart. So it has to go hand in hand, the intellectual development with the purification of the heart. And I always quote Al-Farabi in this. And those who have attended my class, you have heard this so many times. Right? That those who are in my class, you can remember Al-Farabi saying, right? The clarity of the mind, the clarity of the intellect is directly related to the purity of the soul. How Al-Farabi has put it. Right? It has to go hand in hand. It has to go together.
Just checking in if anyone else has any questions about the book and about the life of Said Ahmad Smith.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum. Yeah, so I had a question actually. So I worked on the chat. So I had I came a bit late, so I missed the beginnings. I was wondering, how would you compare between the tasawwuf of Habib Sumait and like a new approach, like Sayyid Muhammad Naqib al-Atta. So one seems to be emphasizing on Ghazali and the other one on Shaykh al-Akbar, or how do you see this kind of approach to the deen?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you are looking for in the answer, right?
Yeah, like I think it's related to the previous question about philosophical versus non-philosophical Sufism, where one is looking at worship of the mind through correct metaphysics and these kind of things, and the other one is more into devotional acts and then daily practice, but without philosophizing much, right?
Yeah. So Ahmad Samit is more of the practice.
Yeah.
That's all. So in terms of, I'm not too sure how you want me to compare, but that is how the books of Said Ahmad Samit is, right? He takes from Al-Ghazali, yes, but the Al-Ghazali that is more of the devotional Al-Ghazali instead of the Ghazali who is philosophical. You know, if you read Al-Ghazali as a whole, right, Al-Ghazali is philosophical even inside his Ihya Ulumuddin, but he was very much aware on where he had to stop when he went too much to philosophical, because the devotion of Ihya Ulumuddin is Ilmul Mu'amala, right, not Ilmul Mukashafa. So therefore, Sayyid Ahmad Samit is basically at that Ilmul Mu'amalah part, right, that making things, what are the steps, what are the actions that you need to do. The Mukashafa is something that you get on your own and we do not need to discuss. So
yeah, what I mean is that, like, if one wants to implement, for example, his teaching in the modern world, then one needs to include some philosophical aspects, right? Because one of the challenges of modernity is really the mind. So one has to like have a clear worldview and involve some philosophical aspects, right?
I wouldn't say there is a must. Again, it depends on who we are. Not everybody needs that. So we cannot generalize it. That's why I mentioned in one of the questions, right, that the prophetic tradition that told us that we need to speak in accordance to the intelligence of the people. So yes, we are in the modern mind, we are in the modern world. Okay, some people requires that philosophizing of some of these Sufi ideas, but some people may not need it. So therefore, we cannot generalize it, because there is in the modern world, his book needs to become more philosophy so that more people will will be able to appreciate it. That would be pushing the hypothesis a bit too much.
Yeah. I mean, that was my assumption. I mean, that was my motivation somehow. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Ustaz, another question, Ustaz. You mentioned he started off with writing on Sastra, Malay literature, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, was there a specific turning point when he suddenly stopped writing about this and he goes on to more spiritual matters, or something that, what was the impetus for that? Or?
That was also something that I was looking out for. The turning point and all that. But I couldn't pinpoint an exact turning point on why that. A probable hypothesis is, to look at the page 47 onwards, right? When I talk about the influence of Al-Marhum Syekh Omar Al-Khatib has on him, right? Because Syekh Omar Al-Khatib has on him was not just about class, because Syekh Omar Al-Khatib was also his mentor in business. Before Marhum, I said Ahmad Samit, all right, learn and study with Syekh Omar Al-Khatib. So he was a mentor for Syekh Ahmad Samit and Marhum Syekh Omar. Right? So probably those experience that he had was a turning point, right? Knowing also that after leaving Madrasah Al-Junaid, right, although he was selected to attend the special class, right, for graduates in order to prepare them for Al-Azhar, he stopped, right, in order for him to work and support the family. But his younger brother, Isa Samit, continued and then was sent over to Azhar. Okay. So, number one, Al-Marhum has that literary skills. He has that literary skills. The actual turning point, I couldn't really pinpoint to it.
And I think he used his literary skills to good effect in his translation and in his writings. His language has always been eloquent. So I don't think he turned away from the language arts. He very much flourished.
Only the genre of writing changed.
Only the genre, yeah.
Genre changed.
So are there any other questions? Oops, there's one question in the chat. Having heard from you about his passion and sacrifice, what do you think local scholars need to do to keep up in today's context? I think he already covered that. They need dedication and all that.
The scholar needs dedication. You need to read and you need to write. Right? To keep up.
There's one little remark you make about him differing in his in the fatwa of the Mufti, and he was in disagreement. Are you able to share what any specific area he was in disagreement with at that time?
Disagreement at that time was the agreement of HOTA. HOTA, Human Organ Transplant Act.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was in disagreement with the fatwa that came from Mufti, which allows for him no.
Assalamualaikum Muhammad Mubarak. A question here. How important was his family's involvement into his writings and publishing? I do understand that his wife was a very, very key figure in his works, in his business. Are they continuing his legacy? His son is now taken over his business, and have they what input have they give you, if any, in the course of you doing your work on this book with regards to his legacy. So are his family, in full support? Are they trying to go into a different direction?
Well, of course, during the time when he was around, two main person in the family is of course his wife and his son. Yeah, his son, the eldest son, and then the other one always help him. And at the beginning of his work, when Valdel Said Isa Semit was in apa ni Mesir and all that, he also helped in to bring some of the books right into Singapore. Where at the beginning of in the early parts, to get Arabic books was difficult. To get Arabic books was difficult. But after his demise, my own reading of the situation right now, basically the main backbone of Pustaka Nasional is not there anymore. So they did try to publish the work of our local asatizas, right? In the early 2010s and all that, after his demise, right? Then after that, it fades off. There was a new publication that came out after Al-Marhum's demise, which was a translation of Al-Atqan fil Ulum al-Quran. Right? Al-Atqan fil Ulum al-Quran. That was translated by one of the ustaz that was with him from very beginning lah, Ustaz Hanafi Shapingi. Yeah, Ustaz Hanafi. But now I I don't see that same enthusiasm in going forward. Almarhum's wife, right? What I heard, I wanted to meet her during the interview, but then I didn't get a chance. I was not able to get her. She didn't want to be interviewed. Now also she is not doing any of these writings and publishing. Yeah. So far, that's what I can gather. Now they are operating from his house at Frankel, right? Without a physical site. Because the Pustaka Islamiyah in Malaysia, the branch of Pustaka Nasional, they still have their shops down there. They still get the book supplies and all that. So it's only at that level. Producing more books, looking at classical texts means that same idea of uplifting the community, all right, the revival of the community is through reading, is through books, is through education. Somehow or another is lost. That's what I see. Allah Rasulullah.
I mean, it doesn't help that even during his time when he was actively writing and publishing, there was not much literary works by local religious teachers here, asatidah here. Much of the books are pretty much from Malaysia, Indonesia, where definitely, obviously, there's a bigger market. And I imagine also for Pustaka Nasional, opening up Pustaka Islamiyah is also, they also face a huge competition because they do have other writers and translators and they work on practically almost a similar works over there. Yeah. And what do you see about the future of the activity over here? I mean, for myself, having gone through the process of writing and then self-publishing, I know it's not easy. And what really needs, what do you think that is required here to create an avenue for to continue in such legacy? Perhaps it's not going to be under Pustaka Nasional. Perhaps I would see them being irrelevant. I mean, if I'm being too harsh, in the near future, and perhaps the use of new media and social media actually is taking over the importance of reading. It's taking away people from books. So, do you have any thoughts about how to advance that?
My thoughts on this is that people of the same mind, we have to get together. So I know that you have written and you have published on your own. Nusantara is also writing and publishing on their own. That is where I chose to publish with Nusantara, because of the objective of Nusantara is to ensure that the works of the Malay scholars of the Malay world can be spread across, right, to other parts of the world. So I guess we need to now sometimes put aside our egos, all right, and start working together. Start working together, because the time where we alone can make the change, we alone can produce things. I think probably that is no more. That interdisciplinary, all right, interdependence now becomes more relevant during this period of time. Yeah. So I do encourage our Ustaz Syukur to work with Nusantara and see what more can be published from with them. And you will be able to get a bit more audience also in terms of your work, because of the context that Nusantara has, that they have already established with one of their works. And then your works also can be put over there. Yeah. We cannot run away from new media. New media will be taking over. So then the next stage is how, all right, publishers like this could work with Amazon and changed it to Kindle editions. Yeah, you have to do it. You have to work with the Kindle editions too. All right. Although, right.
Although I think Ibrahim would
Yeah,
have
I
something to
know.
say about
Yeah,
that.
I know Ibrahim, myself, Razif, all right, Alvin, all these people, all of us, we love the physical book. We love to have that physical book. But, well, we have to be realistic too. If the objective is more people to have access of knowledge, right? Although you can say it's only access of information, not knowledge. If you want to go into philosophical debate, lah, okay, all right. But if you want people to read more and make it accessible, we probably have to work, all right, within that domain. Allah Rasulullah. And then one more is uh we need people who can sponsor. We need people who can do sponsorship. All right, sponsorship, all right, in producing books, sponsorship in even paying the asatizas for the time that they spent in writing. Because when they spend in writing means they cannot teach, they cannot do any other things. So we need our philanthropists to come in, to pump in money, and do not look at the return of investment, all right, as an immediate thing. Then this can start back to flourish. Yeah, if not, it's going to be hard, and it will continue to be difficult for people to produce.
Just to follow up on that point about philanthropy, um, there was this old man, probably in his 70s or 80s. He came to Warda a few years ago, and he was from Turkey. So I was asking him, what does he do? He says that from the time he graduated from university, maybe before the war, he has been translating Islamic texts from Arabic to the Turkish language. And that is all he has done all his life. And this is all paid for by the wakaf, of his wakaf. So this is the importance of wakaf, is the importance of publishing houses like what has happened to Pustaka Nasional. It underscores the fact that you need to form the institution. You need to bed it into the long view of the community that is beyond one lifetime, two lifetimes. It must be beyond that. And one mechanism we already have is the wakaf. So this Turkish wakaf have been doing it since the time of the Ottomans, and the work is still carrying on. And this is what we have to do. We have to think not just, as you say, of course, very important for us to collaborate within our contemporaries, but we have to collaborate between generations. And perhaps the only way to do that is for us to revive the idea of wakaf, which in Singapore is probably died down quite a lot, because we don't have that long-term thinking anymore.
True. When Warda also has a role to play.
I also like to add about the point that you made about having people to to be the backbone of support, and perhaps financially, because there is a whole economic ecosystem with regards to publishing, and you have distribution also, and then retail and all that. And of course, if you use new media as well, and then you need the people to actually churn those books out into the digital space. And I'm actually very astonished, or very surprised at the approach of one writer. I cannot remember his name, but he wrote the book Revelation, about the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I believe he comes from an engineering background, and his book, I think, is a revolutionary approach at writing and chronicling the seerah of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in such ways that appeals to a lot of people. And I looked at it; it looks like a standard textbook. And this is where I think, for people like me, for example, we can write. I think what we also would need would be the help of creative writers. Creative writing, I think, is a very important aspect now. And people don't just really want to read books, endlessly text from beginning to the end. I think only academics could do that right now, nowadays. You know, a lot of people, they're more focused about what images and what graphs could actually help them understand important aspects and the messages that they want to put in the book. So this is another area. Perhaps the writers themselves could be trained into creative writing and how they make the books more so-called interactive and appealing. I do know some Malaysian publishers are going into that. They're making it very colorful and all that. Although sometimes it kind of tended towards being a bit more childish in approach. But we need something more professional. And I think that book perhaps could be a specimen or somehow a direction that perhaps our writers or future writers could take.
So basically, the idea that it's interdisciplinary. We are all interdependents. Yeah. We need to put aside our egos and work together. So,
But Ustad, but Ustad Mubarak, thank you very much for raising the elephant in the room, which is basically economics. You know, I always ask myself, how does Ustad Semaid do this? You know, full-time dedication. You know, he needs to support his family. He needs to earn an income. You know, he needs to pay well in contemporary Singapore, your HDB, your ERP, or whatever. You know, you need to make sure you cover your financial obligations. And then you can do this. I mean, if I'm a millionaire or if I'm financially independent, I can spend all my time doing this. Right? But if I'm not, then there's opportunity cost. You know, and that's the difficult part.
but probably when we are millionaires, we will find other excuses not to write also.
That's what we need to purify also. Yeah, but you know, that is important. The economics is important.
You can also look at it from another view. And that is the view in terms of barakah, because when you dedicate your life to the work of Allah, then things fall into place. You just need to trust the process. And I think that that's what we can see from the life of Sayyid Ahmad Semaid. Because if you look at it and you tabulate the things that he's done, and you look at the number of hours in his lifetime, it's impossible for him to have achieved all that he has done. So there is some level of divine intervention, of barakah, of expanding the time, of expanding your rizki in order for you to meet your needs and in order for you to complete all your tasks. So
yep.
Sometimes we can't think of it as a cost benefit, because the divine hand is always there.
Yes.
I'm just observing from the life of Sayyid Ahmad, and observing from the life of many scholars. this happens to them. Alhamdulillah.
Yes, inshallah.
Right, Brother Ibrahim?
Yes, it's coming up to 9:30. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights on your research. It's almost like as if you have to defend your thesis again. So
True.
Master thesis, I've been scrutinized. Left, right. Not yet published my PhD thesis. I'm going to be dead.
So I have to thank you again. I mean, if we are looking for examples of people with dedication, and I know you are uncomfortable when I say this, but you are one of those people that I look up for when I'm looking for people who currently are there and putting in the work for Allah and His Messenger. So thank you for being what you do.
His dua. Everything is from Allah and His Rasul. We are Allah's servant and the Prophet's helpers.
So Ustaz, could you help us close the dua and maybe also do a short dua for Almarhum as well?
إلى حضرة النبي المصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإلى روحه سيد أحمد بن محمد سميد الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر له وارحمه وعافه واعف عنه. اللهم اغفر له وارحمه وعافه واعف عنه. اللهم اغفر له وارحمه وعافه واعف عنه وتجاوز عنا وعنه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارحمنا إذا صرنا من أصحاب القبور ووفقنا لعمل صالح وقاسناه على ممر الدهور. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you everybody to Syukul, Ustazah Dr. Rohana is also here. Thank you very much for joining, and the Asatizahs and some of the scholars who are here. Thank you very much for joining our short sharing on this book. Inshallah.
Assalamualaikum.